Well, howdy there, folks. A good day at the office. Just come up at the moment. The Congress is okay. Backtrack. About 10 days ago, give or take, we did an article or post basically looking at the Trump connections to members of the Iran-Contra affair, including William Barr, who was the Attorney General when George Bush was the president. Like, give you again background a bit further. Iran-Contra, illegal foreign policy, guns to Nicaragua, guns to the Mujahideen, they all get busted. The Reagan-Bush administration gets a pardon to a lot of felons, and then first of all they're able to do that because they have a thing called the Tower Commission, which exonerates Ronald Reagan and George Bush's involvement. Now, when I got a legal memorandum from Richard V. Allen, who's a national security advisor, basically threatening to sue me for an article I wrote looking at all the things he was involved in when he first moved into New Zealand. He was one of the guys that set up around Melbourne and Queenstown, which has become a bit of a gated community of hedge fund and oil and ex-spies and stuff. But we did this piece. He threatened to sue us. He turned around and said, "We got nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do with the Iran-Contra affair." That was carried out by an aide who was working on behalf of a senator, and that senator would turn out to be John Towers, the senator from Texas, who went on to head the Towers Commission, which exonerated George Bush and Ronald Reagan. As Richard V. Allen himself stated in his legal memorandum to me. So you don't get much more than the horse's mouth directly in terms of content and documents. Now, when because they were exonerated, they were then able to issue pardons. And so William Barr, whose father was I want to say Bill Barr, Donald Barr, but he's basically ex-OSS intelligence agency, went on to run the Dalton Academy, who gave Jeffrey Epstein his first job, even though he wasn't really qualified and was a college dropout. And Barr wrote some very dodgy books about trafficking and oligarchs and stuff. And anyway, he got fired because he had some inappropriate behaviour with students there. And his son, in the meantime, not Epstein but Barr's son, went on to be a lawyer for the CIA for 7 years, and then Bush's Attorney General. And during that, he said, advised on these pardons for a member of people that were tied up with the Iran-Contra affair and were involved in basically running what Palantir is wanting to do right now, is a full mass surveillance, Big Brother takeover of the whole Democratic congressional system. So we wrote this all down, and we basically highlighted the fact that what we were complaining about, well, what we were raising was all this stuff about Virginia Jeffries and whatever. That was all hearsay. We wanted to know about the specifics, what was happening to the chain of evidence that was being contaminated, and we zeroed in on the fact that when the Epstein safe the order was given to break to cut open the safe and see what was in there, but then they couldn't take any stuff out because they didn't do a warrant, so it had to stay there, and they left it there for 4 days unguarded. And it turned out that the person who wrote that order was William Barr, the same guy that I just told you about. He gave the order, but he didn't give an order to actually take any evidence out. So it was left there 4 days and just walked out the door. Now, this has been written by other journalists, so I can't say without 100% certain that I'm responsible, but it is a really good feeling when you put something like out that and somebody in Congress turns around and says, "Hey, what the hell's going on here?" And these are one of the questions that are now being asked of basically Trump, and from that it's also they've now got to 14 days that they must release the files. And as I'm saying, that still leaves a lot of time for stuff to be digitalized, wiped and deleted, but it's now actually bringing the situation, and again, I don't care whether Bill Clinton's files or Donald Trump's, I just want those files released, and then we can examine forensically what else is not missing there, and these things like, somebody had to sign off for that warrant. Well, we now know the answer to that. That warrant was signed off by none other than Bill Barr, who has a direct relationship to. So, it's this reaffirming the fact that actually, yes, there is something going on there. But instead of worrying about the hearsay stuff, we need to focus on these boring details about when protocol is actually breached, because that kind of always gives you a paper trail back to the person that's actually, causing deviations from the norm. So, anyway, that's it. Feeling very, very stoked about this sort of things actually occurring, and maybe I said, maybe we weren't directly responsible, because I said, it had been raised before him, but I was the first one that went back and said, well, now I said, hey, wait a minute, when that happened last year, who actually ordered that? And we now have an answer, and that answer is actually rattling, all the way to Washington DC, which, in this line of inquiry, like I've said, Richard V. Allen suing me, that was that sits up on my office. You don't have days like this. These are rare days. Most of it's pretty boring, and you go without really any understanding if there's any impact of shaking. But today has been one of those. We put a major football down on the field, and it feels good. So hoo-ha, and let's get going. This has been VIDGEN on Deadline TV and the Deadline Report, care of Fresh FM.